This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
Uh-oh, the last cookie.
You can get a new box of cookies in as fast as an hour with Walmart Express Delivery.
Are you my guilty self-conscience?
No, I'm the voice offering you promo code EXPRESS for free delivery on your first order.
Hey, who ate my cookies?
You mean, these cookies?
Order now. Welcome to your Walmart. Promotion valid for first express delivery order. $50 minimum subject to availability. Restrictions apply.
The Dental Download podcast is your source for insight from conversations with fellow dentists, specialists, and leaders in the industry. With new episodes every Monday morning, I'm your host, Dr. Haley. Let's get into this week's episode.
Happy Monday. Welcome back to another episode of the Dental Download podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Haley, and this is going to be a solo episode. So we're going to be recapping my experience at my implant course. So especially on YouTube, but also on the podcast, I have been talking about I'm going to this implant course in a few months, in a couple months, in a few weeks, in a couple weeks, and then I finally went. So I went to this course at the end of March, and it was a week long, 91 credits. Not all in that week. We did 35 hours prior to going of online modules, and then the rest of the hours were during that intensive week-long course. So I'll kind of go through some FAQs first, things people just baseline want to know these facts, and then I'll get more into day by day what my experience was like and if and how I'm kind of implementing things back into real life practice. So who did I take the course through? It was through Implant Pathway. That's the name of the company. So that is down in Arizona, and you pay for your flight out there and your hotel for the week. And they have this kind of introduction level implant course that you can take, but they also have a bunch of other follow-up courses or courses you could take instead. If you maybe already have other training, baseline training or experience in implants, you could take some of their more specific courses specifically for sinus surgery, specifically for grafting, specifically for implant complications. So they have a wide range of surgical courses, and they even have a restorative course as well. So this was kind of their a little bit of everything, any experience level welcome program. And it's session 1, session 2, session 3 is how they break it up. And then I chose and was recommended to do the fast track version of that, where you get sessions 1 through 3 complete all at once. Session 1 is those 35 hours that I mentioned that you do in advance. And then sessions 2 and 3 were completed in a 1-week period, versus if someone else signed up for that package, not as a fast track, just as session 1 through 3, or maybe paid for one session at a time, you would have the online modules, and then session 2 would be its own, I think, 3-day weekend. And then session 3 would be its own 3-day weekend. So this just kind of gets it all done with one traveling and one set of time off of work, and a little bit more fast paced as well, because I think it's, 6 days into 5 days for us. So that's who it's through, and that's how it works. If you want to look it up on their website and see what I took, I don't off the top of my head know the exact dollar and cents cost, somewhere around $18,000. And personally, I am very, very grateful my work paid for the course for me as part of my CE allowance, I guess you could say. So they supported me through investing in my learning in that way, and know that I can bring the service back to the practice is kind of how we talked about it and decided that it was a good decision on their part and on my part. Why implants? So most schools, myself included, did not get a lot of training in implant placement in dental school. We were only required to restore a single implant, and we were not required, or most students did not have the experience to place any implants. and most students restored anywhere from 1 to maybe 5 or 6 implants. Most people did not restore more than that. So I had very, very limited hands-on experience with implants. We had several courses about them, but in my opinion, courses just, it doesn't stick with you and nothing really feels comfortable, and you don't feel like you're good at anything till you do it physically yourself a lot. I think there's something to be said about shadowing and watching. I worked at an oral surgeon office when I was a pre-dental. I spent time in the specialty clinics in school watching implant surgeries, watching sinus surgeries, grafting, but it just doesn't sink in the same unless you're doing it yourself. So I needed more training, in my opinion, to be able to competently place implants in practice. And why I was interested in it, we do already have another doctor placing implants. Actually, 2 of the doctors at our practice comfortably place implants. One doesn't really do it often anymore, but the other doctor does a lot of implants very often. So why did they want or need me placing implants? They didn't specifically ask me to take the course. I brought up my own interest, but the other doctor does a lot of large full mouth rehabilitation cases. So by me having the skills to do single implant, it's kind of the same thought process as me having the skills to do arches and quadrants of fillings and crowns. By me doing those services for patients, it frees up more time for the other doctors to do larger, more intensive cases of their passions and niche. So if I'm able to take the patient that needs a single tooth replaced with an implant off of the schedule of our doctor that's doing full mouth rehabilitations, he now has more time to do those cases as I'm taking on the smaller, I guess you could say, cases. So that's sort of how it's going to fit into the practice and why it made sense for us to pursue that. And then why, I guess more on why implants in general. So I knew I wanted to expand beyond my dental school training and skill set. I'd already taken, if you remember, and I have a podcast about it, a CE course back in the fall for CEREC and crowns. So that really helped me feel a lot more confident going back into practice with crowns. I never felt unconfident because I felt like I had sufficient experience at school, but it really helped me understand the CEREC system and what it looks for when you're scanning and milling crowns that fit well, things that they don't necessarily mention in school or don't emphasize enough of parameters for a good crown prep in school compared to parameters for a crown prep that CEREC can read really well and will fit really easily without a lot of adjustments are just a little bit different. It's not that they're contradictory, but it's just other things to focus on. So that's just made my process a lot more streamlined and a lot less errors or adjustments and time in the chair. So that was a great experience, but it was still just furthering a little bit of understanding in a skill that I already had versus implants was more of a new skill. And I wanted to either pursue more training in endodontics, which is root canals, or in the implants. And honestly, to me, it just seemed like implants was a better investment of the time and money and, knowledge because it's a lot more predictable for the most part, if you're, having proper case selection. And I feel there's a larger need for the straightforward cases with implants than there are a need for root canals in my office for straightforward cases. I think there's a decent amount of need for molar endo, and I personally am not at that point yet. I would have wanted more training. So did I want to get into molar endo or get into implants? And to me, there's so much more variation, especially with maxillary molar endo, that even if you're doing a lot of training, you're going to run into so many different cases. And not to say that there's not different bone densities, different anatomy that can impact your implant placement. Of course there is with all of the surgeries, but it really is a lot more straightforward, especially if you're doing guided surgery, because it's all pre-planned and we have our digital scan to make a plan and we have a guide and you know exactly what sequence you're going to use and exactly where the implant's going to go. And it's pretty straightforward versus even though we have technology to help with root canals, there's still a lot of freehand skill that goes into that and tactile sensation and things. And actually in my implant course, we did everything freehand. So I'm not saying that there isn't tactile skills that go into implant placement, because there certainly is, but you don't have to do it without a guide for a lot of cases, especially early on in your implant journey. So to me, basically, implants just seemed a little bit more straightforward, and I also felt like there would be a higher need for it. So that's why I decided that was the next tool I wanted to add to my tool belt as services that I can offer our patients. So I signed up for this course a while ago. I think it was towards the end of last year. So I think I signed up maybe December, January time for March, which is when I took it. There were other classes open sooner. I think they book out a few months in advance typically, but I was more so going off my personal life schedule. I have my sister's wedding coming up in May. I knew April would be really busy, so I didn't really want to do anything April, May, and then June, July, we have stuff getting ready for my own wedding. And then at that point, it's already halfway through the year. I just felt like that was too late into the year to be adding in this skill. I was ready to get the training so that I could start implementing it and see kind of the fruits of the labor start to come to fruition throughout this calendar year and start treating patients sooner, offering this sooner to people. So I didn't want to wait too long into the year. But January and February just felt a little too soon, and March just seemed like a sweet spot of, okay, we're through kind of the first quarter of the year, and then I can go into the second quarter of the year ready to place implants. And I'm going to skip ahead to the end of this saga. Have I been placing implants in practice yet? Not yet, only at the course. So we're still kind of on the lookout for good cases for me. We've planned a couple. So a couple are kind of in limbo, waiting for the patients to be ready to commit financially. Obviously, implants are a bigger investment. So sometimes it just takes a little bit longer to work with the patient to get them there to be ready to do it. So we have a couple that are selected and I've approved that seem like good options for me, but nothing is on the schedule, which I'm excited for the day something gets on the schedule. I'm also, of course, a little bit nervous. And I'm also very, very, very grateful for the doc at my office that has a lot of implant experience. Having that mentor available is a great resource to have. I plan to do my first several that are second stage, so tooth already missing, with guides. That's what he recommended, and I really do trust him. So he's also who recommended me this specific course. There's several other courses out there. I'll get into kind of some of the things I think are important to know going into at least this course, because that's the only one I've taken, and maybe some misconceptions people might have about implant courses, especially given how much you're investing in them. But again, we'll get there. But I wanted to kind of jump ahead to say I haven't placed 100 implants since being back for 2 weeks of work. I've placed 0 in practice so far, but I think it's important to have proper case selection. And also, I mean, patients need to trust me. It's surgery, and I'm over time, almost a year into this practice, getting and developing and growing in trust with this patient base. And people have trusted me with restorative work and extractions, but you know, an implant's a whole nother thing. It's a huge investment, and they know Dr. Bono does them all the time, and they know that I'm trained in it too. But to them, I mean, it's a big decision to which doctor they want to work with as well. So there's a lot that goes into having patients on my schedule for implant placements. But I have confidence that as time goes, there will be more, and it'll just kind of become a routine thing that when I see a filling or a crown prep on my schedule, that's just my schedule. And I'm sure as time goes, there'll be some implant placements on there and some implant restorations, and it will be no big deal. But it is not quite at that point yet. So I think that's kind of all the FAQs. Oh, last thing with financing. I do want to mention, if it's something you're going to be paying for yourself, They do have a payment plan. Even I, through the office, used the payment plan just to break up when the money was having to come out of the account. So they do have a payment plan. I think you can break it up into like 6 or 7 payments, so it makes it a little bit more doable. And then they also have a new grad discount, so I use that as well. I think that's for 3 years out of school or maybe 5. Definitely 5 or less. It's either 3 or 5. So don't miss out on that either. If you're just a little bit out of school, make sure that if you're interested in that, you take the course soon while you still qualify as a new grad. But overall, I guess the last FAQ, was it good? Do I recommend it? If you don't feel like listening to the rest of my recap of it, I think it was really great. I do recommend it. I had a wonderful experience and I learned a lot. I will kind of get into pros and cons, or just like expectations, because I went into it with pretty much no expectations, even though the doctor at my office had taken this course and recommended it and everything. He's also taken a ton of other courses. So, and it was a few years ago. So the course has grown and changed since then. So he didn't give me a lot of, this is exactly what's going to happen every single day. So I pretty much went into it with zero expectations and no idea what it was going to be like. And I think some things in my head that I thought, maybe we'll get to do this or that, didn't necessarily happen. But I think there were a lot of great other things I wasn't expecting that were kind of pleasant surprises too.
Spring is here, and you can now get almost anything you need for your sunny days delivered with Uber Eats. What do we mean by almost? Well, you can't get a well-groomed lawn delivered, but you can get a chicken parmesan delivered. A cabana? That's a no. But a banana? That's a yes. A nice tan? Sorry, nope. But a box fan? Happily, yes. A day of sunshine? No. A box of fine wines? Yes. Uber Eats can definitely get you that. Get almost anything delivered with Uber Eats. Order now. Alcohol in select markets. Product availability may vary by region. See app for details.
To the salon owners, the spa experts, the med spa mavens, those who make every cut, massage, and facial feel like a small miracle. Boulevard sees you. You transform days, lift spirits. You help people become the best versions of themselves. At Boulevard, they see you. That's why they built the first and only complete client experience platform that works as beautifully as you do. See for yourself at joinblvd.com/Spotify. Boulevard, software for self-care businesses.
When you're placing a dental implant, a comprehensive plan for success is non-negotiable. The same holds true for maintaining your dental unit water lines. Granted, waterline maintenance isn't exactly an everyday conversation, but it probably should be. Microbial contamination buildup does not taste good. It doesn't smell good. And it's certainly not giving patients the highest quality water in their oral cavity. But there is an easy solution. A-dec ICX. A-dec ICX waterline treatment tablets and ICX Renew waterline shock treatment work together to eliminate buildup and prevent future accumulation. They're ready to use, so maintenance is simple and efficient. And bonus, they're formulated without harsh chemicals. Use the link in my show notes to learn more about this topic and request a free sample. So we'll go through each day of the course, and then I'll also talk through any of those other expectation type things if we didn't already cover it as I'm just talking through the course. So first thing is that session 1 that you do anytime. And that was another reason that I signed up for this course. I think I did in December because I thought I might do some of it over winter break from work. I didn't end up doing that. I was just hanging out with my family. But I thought I was going to have all this time to watch this CE, and I did, but I just didn't use all that time. And I ended up watching 50, 70% of it all the couple weeks before the course. And then I did the other ones January, February, here and there, like 15, 20 hours. And then the other 15-ish hours I did really close to the course in March. And it's nice because you do have access to those presentations and modules and all that forever. I have, the access to the educational content, which is great. And I have access to the slides and presentations and everything from the actual week-long program as well. So you get to keep all those if you ever want to refresh on any skills. And they have a textbook if you want to purchase it, and just like some other things if you need more resources when you're home to look at rather than just Googling things. So all of that was good and useful. Obviously, it just kind of felt like being back in school, nothing all that exciting. Some of the lectures were better than others, and that's just kind of the nature of what content is interesting versus a little more boring but necessary. Every module had an associated 10-question quiz. You had to get an 80% to pass, and you could retake it if you didn't pass, obviously, until you did pass. So relatively straightforward, and I definitely learned some things and gave me a really good refresher from learning implants in dental school over a year ago to now actually getting ready to go do surgeries on patients. I kept reminding myself, make sure you're paying attention, make sure you're really taking in this information because you will be doing surgeries on real people, and this is important information. So it's easy when you're just watching a screen to kind of get sidetracked and all of that, but I really tried to remind myself that it was important content. So I'm going to pull up my Instagram here because I documented on my stories what we did each day, and I haven't posted it yet, but I am going to be posting a reel and TikTok kind of short form content from the course if you want to see any physical video footage, and then eventually I'm going to get a vlog up too. I need to edit them, but holidays, family things, a lot going on this time of year. So next couple weeks, something will be up, I'm sure. But first day was fun. We had a presentation from the dentist that runs Pathway, and he kind of let us just get to know him as a person, his journey into implantology, and why he started Pathway, introduced us to some of the other doctors that we would be working with that week. And it just felt really personable and nice to connect with a real person. And that was just definitely a standout thing about this program, as it was very interpersonal. And I think that's something you want to look for in an implant program that you're going to. You want to walk away with a mentor. You want to walk away knowing you have a doctor or multiple doctors on speed dial that you can review a tough case with, ask a question. You want to feel comfortable with the peers in the class. You want to get to know them. So they did a really great job of picking preceptor, instructor, dentists to work with us, as well as helping us as a class going through this week get to know each other. And so we kind of got there and we had our little station and we got all the slides and stuff available to us. We, went around the room, introduced ourselves, said like where we went to school, what our experience level with implants is. You're going to see a range. You're going to see most people very low experience, maybe have never placed any or have never restored any, or maybe restore a lot but never placed, or maybe placed a handful but want more experience, or maybe someone that's placed and restored hundreds, but they just know this is a good course and they want to see what they can get out of it. So there's a whole range. I think there's about 20 people in the class. And same thing, a range with when they're coming out of school. Obviously, you can imagine most of them were not first year out of school like I was. There was one other classmate that was, and then most people were probably within their first 5 years of practice. And then there was a couple people that were in their first, 15, 20 years of practice. So first day, we also had some more in-person lectures still. So you didn't get right into surgery on live people first day. We had some lectures just really reiterating the most important things from the online modules. So things like medical complications, risk management, diagnostics, treatment planning. And then we also had review and lectures further on taking out teeth atraumatically. So atraumatic extractions, meaning you're not damaging all of the bone, where putting in an implant in an immediate site is not going to work. So taking out teeth as smoothly as possible. And that was definitely something that I didn't know before I started watching the modules would be such an emphasis. But as I went through the modules, it all made a lot of sense. And I was actually really looking forward to that element of this course of actually getting more instruction on extractions. I didn't really think that that would be a component of an implant course. But as you think about it more and knowing that in order to put an implant in, you must have lost a tooth at some point. So it makes sense that they kind of go hand in hand. But I just thought you'd have to take separate type of course to get instruction on extractions. So that was a surprise about my experience with the course in a pleasant way was that I got a lot of good instruction on extractions. So I wasn't necessarily expecting to get good instruction on surgical extraction techniques, sectioning teeth, atraumatic extractions, but that was great because that is an area that I mentioned to you all on the podcast. I am still working on going up on a year out of practice. I feel like I've gotten a lot better even before the course, but now after the course, I also feel significantly more confident with tougher extractions, and they don't feel as tough anymore, which is really, really cool. So that was a takeaway I had no idea was going to be a component of this, but was actually a very large component of at least this course specifically. We also had lectures more about placing implants for immediates and placing them in healed sites. And we went through a lot of cases. And that was another thing I loved about this specific program was it was very, very case focused, which I would hope most would be. And I would prefer that. So maybe something to think about when you're comparing or researching about different programs to see which one you want to take. Very, very case focused. A lot of here's where this case went wrong, here's why it went wrong, here's what to do now that it went wrong, but here's how you can avoid it. And I think that's so essential. Obviously, you want to do as little damage in life as you can, and you want to learn from other people's mistakes so that you don't have to make them too. So it was really helpful to see a lot of those cases, but also see a lot of successful cases and talk through why and how all of the planning process worked to put out a successful case. And they also had, follow-ups over time of these cases too, because it's one thing to say, hey, look at this pretty post-op day one, but let's see how did this do over 5-10 years? How is that implant holding up? And that was really insightful as well to learn from. So towards the end of the first day, we did get into more hands-on things. We had suture practice on models. Another thing I didn't know if it would or wouldn't be part of this course was suturing. And that was really something I was looking forward to as well because I basically had no training in that in dental school. They did a very, very poor job of training us at all with suturing. So it was nice to get practice. We just used those like rubber Amazon models. So it's not like it was any live tissue of like a pig jaw or something like that you might use in other suture sessions. I believe if you take the traditional pathway without the fast track, if you just go to session 2 on its own, I believe you would use like a pig jaw and be suturing on more live tissue. I mean, dead, but physical tissue. But we did not, which was fine. It was still very sufficient and I learned a lot. And even though during that period of the class, it was just one instructor that went over slides of the different sutures, showed us different videos, and then we just went into practicing on the models. There was one instructor at that point for all 20 of us. I still felt like I got a lot of personal attention and help with my suturing, probably because other people were really good at it and I needed more help at that point, but I was willing to ask questions. In any course, you definitely want to go into it willing to ask a lot of questions, trying to learn. And they really emphasize this during the course, you absolutely do not want to leave having any questions. If you leave with a question or an uncertainty or something you're not sure about, that's your fault because you should have asked, is what they kept telling us. Like ask everything that pops into your head. There's no stupid questions. Ask us how to do something. Ask us something not even completely related to this case. Ask us about how we get these cases accepted in practice. Ask us all kinds of things. And when I'm saying ask us, who's the us? I know I mentioned the lecture is just a single instructor to our room of students listening to the lecture. But eventually, once you move on to more hands-on stuff, you will have a 2 student to 1 instructor ratio. So eventually, there's all kinds of instructors for us to work with. The next thing we did the first day was more implant models. So day 1 and 2, we did a lot with models. So first day, we practiced on doing flaps and placing implants into healed sites. So if a tooth was already extracted, whether it healed naturally or had some grafted things done, now placing the implant months later. Or maybe a tooth has been missing for a long time, whatever it may be, but opening a flap, retracting, placing an implant into healed bone. And then we also we're getting ready for the next day, which is where we were doing immediate implant practice. So that was also on a model, but there was what would look like when you take a tooth out and there's the extraction site. So if it was a maxillary molar, that you can see where the 3 roots were and where that interradicular bony peak is. And maybe knowing you want to put the implant kind of right with that bony peak, but a little bit more palatal, things like that. So working on where do you want to put them for different immediate placement sites? Where do you want to avoid of crucial anatomy, different nerves that you don't want to hit, things like that, or you don't want to perforate the buccal plate, all these different things. So working on hand placement, getting used to using the motor, the implant system. Another thing to maybe consider is what implant system they're teaching on and what implant system you're using in practice, right? If you have a specific one in practice and it's not going to change if they already own it and that's just what you're going to use, it could be useful to take a program that teaches on that exact kit. I don't think it matters that much. Like, this course is not the same kit that we use at my office. This course uses BioHorizons and my office is now using Neodent. So it doesn't really matter if you at least have a rep or someone that can explain the kit and system that you have at your office to you and how it correlates with what you learned at the course. I would make sure you refresh yourself on whatever kit and system you have at your office before you go to the course and kind of generally understand how you use it. That way you can compare it to what you're using at the course and make sure that as they're going through each step, you say, this is the same as mine, this is the same as mine, no, that's not the same as mine. What I would do now is use this piece or that piece, or mine is this shape or that shape or whatever it may be. So keeping that in mind as well is another thing you could think about. And one of my favorite and the coolest parts of this course was getting to learn PRF, which is platelet-rich fibrin. So we learned every step from the venipuncture, which is, you know, what a person does that is drawing blood. So we learned all of that and got at least a couple times of practicing that on a patient or on each other. And we were able to draw the blood and put it in the tubes and run it through the centrifuge and then extract the PRF from that and mix up either sticky bone or make the slug into membranes. So all different kinds of things. But that was really, really cool and something that I know that same doctor I always talk about doing the surgeries at my office. I know he has all the setup for PRF at our office and he uses it. So I was really gung-ho, like, oh my gosh, I'm going to go back and use this all the time. This is super cool. I still haven't used it yet since being back either. I think there's kind of several different schools of thought when it comes to grafting. I think that the research backing PRF is very, very strong and sound and that it's wonderful. But I think we are only going to use it in situations where patients know that they want to get an implant. If patients are pretty adamant that they're not interested in replacing this tooth, they typically don't want to pay for the grafting. So I haven't done any grafting yet, even though now I feel pretty confident too. I don't anticipate myself doing much grafting without PRF just because I think it's not as good and we have the ability to do the PRF. So I would rather just do that. But again, so far, not on my schedule, nothing planned, but it's nice to know that I understand it now and had hands-on experience and feel good doing it. I hope that in the next couple months, I'm using this stuff a little bit more hands-on just so I don't feel like I'm losing my abilities and losing that hands-on skill that I felt good about at the course. They definitely tell you, have implants scheduled the Monday you get back, get right into it. Like, don't wait for the perfect case, take on any case. Obviously not too hard, but no case is going to be perfect. You just have to start doing them. Like anything, it'll get easier, which is all true. But I mean, at the end of the day, you can't force someone to let you put an implant in them. It just, sometimes it takes time and that's okay. That's what I'm trying to tell myself at least. And of course, Like anything that you go to, there were some sponsors. So there were sponsors about financing. There were sponsors like BioHorizons. There was sponsors Zest, which is a lot of the most common kind of locators for overdentures. So the ones that snap in and out of implants. So they were there and kind of taught us how to use their systems and learned about financing and all that jazz. But that was also nice because they would cover some evening events and like happy hours and dinners and things for us. So we only had to get our own dinners like half the time. The other time it was paid for by the sponsors. And it was a nice time for us to meet some of the doctors, meet each other more, and get to know each other as a group. Like I said, I felt like they did a really good job of helping us have the opportunity to bond as a group and connect and learn from each other, whether we're talking about implants or other elements of our practice or just life in general. I always really enjoy that at courses, getting to connect with the dentists and learn their different background too, the fellow classmates. So that pretty much took us through Monday and Tuesday. And then Wednesday, we were doing more practice, hands-on things, but nothing on patients yet. We also were doing alveoloplasty on the model. So that's where you're shaving down the bone so that it's smoother, more level, and at a point where it's thick and wide enough for you to place an implant. And a lot of times that's for fully edentulous arches, for things like fixed dentures or snap-in overdentures. But all that practice we pretty much did on models first before we moved on to real patients. Wednesday afternoon was our first time in the clinic and seeing patients, and their clinic is free to patients for the implants. They would still have to pay for their prosthesis. So a lot of the patients are referred from outside dentists, and they get the implants done at this New Horizons center, and then they go back to have it restored at their dentist. So they got the implants for free. Or some people get the implants for free at this center and then also return to the center for the restoration, but they have to pay for that. And same kind of thing, I'm sure they can use financing and different options like that. But that is kind of where the patient base comes from. So they know that they're being worked on by licensed dentists, but they're in an educational setting. And like I said, we had a 2-to-1 ratio, or paired up with another student with similar experience level in the class, and then one instructor. And you had a different instructor each kind of segment. So if you broke up afternoon, morning, afternoon, was a different instructor, which I always think is nice because you're able to get different teaching styles, get different experience, and hear different stories from all the different instructors that you had the opportunity to work with. And then, of course, they encouraged us to, if we finished early or something like that, peek into other students' operatories, observe, ask questions with them to get to know other instructors that weren't directly paired up with you, learn about their experiences, share cases with each other, learn from each other too. So it wasn't like I was only learning from the specific cases that I physically did. I also learned a lot from my peers' cases, which is, again, very, very beneficial. But Wednesday is where we're at in the week. Wednesday afternoon, we were paired up to do a full arch extraction. So that was to get ready to do eventually implant placement. So just kind of getting our hands in there, working on atraumatic extractions, flap design, and suturing. And then also in my case, we did the PRF, sticky bone and membrane, and then sutured up. So good experience. Then Thursday morning, we had 2 patients. So my partner and I each had kind of our own patient where we were the lead and then assisted each other and then flip-flopped. So my patient was immediate extraction number 31 and placement of the implant with the corresponding healing abutment. So the thought process for immediate implants is pretty much, if you can, then go for it. But everyone kind of has different beliefs on them across the community of implantologists. But most people, I think the thought process is, if you're getting enough stability, then by all means, put it in there and let it integrate over time. And you can check the stability with, you have your motor kind of tells you when it torques out, when it can't move anymore. It tells you what the Newton centimeters is at. And then you also have kind of your hand ratchets that you can check with too. But anyways, that was really good. And I did a good job with it, which was nice. Then the rest of the week went not as much as I expected. So this is what I was saying at the beginning, kind of expectations versus reality, at least for this course. I did not go into it thinking I was going to place 100 implants. I knew that it was just like unrealistic, but I didn't know to what scale we would place. How many-ish would we do? So I would say this is very much not a volume-based program. It is a much more intellectual case thinking process and really patient focused and like a true clinic medical surgery experience. So not rushing through cases, patients are properly worked up and treated very well, and we are using very high quality materials and grafting well and being pretty meticulous with things. And as I said, it's just not very heavy volume based. I don't know if some of these other programs that maybe go out of the country or something, if they're just sinking 50 implants in a day in people and just sending them on their way. I would assume not. I'm not saying people are doing poor work, but at least in this specific course, most people I think placed definitely less than 10 at the course. I placed 5, maybe 4 or 5 over the whole time. So it's not volume based at all, but I gained so much knowledge. I don't walk away feeling like I got a poor experience just because that's not a high number, because I learned again from the implants we chose not to place for different reasons of the bone quality, and from all my peers who had maybe something go wrong or had things go very right. I learned from all of them too, even though I wasn't the one physically holding the implant handpiece and motor. So it was different than what I expected, but I still don't think it was a bad or subpar experience by any means. Then we got into Thursday afternoon. So like I said, Wednesday afternoon was extractions. Thursday morning, we each had a single implant. Thursday afternoon, we shared a case and each placed another single implant. I would say like the trickiest thing is just the size of the implant and its drill, I guess, if you want to call it that attaches to the implant, and doing your osteotomies and things and fitting all of that in the posterior, which is where most people are missing teeth, is very, very tricky. And making sure you're at the right angle. It's like you can fit it back there and think that you're doing your osteotomy and placing your implant at the right angle. And the angle matters because that's where the abutment, which is kind of like the core, if you had a natural tooth, the base comes out of. And if it's coming out at a weird angle, then your restoration is going to come out at a weird angle, and then the occlusion is going to be off, forces will be off, implant will fail because forces are not being directed properly, and it's going to cause bone loss and implant failure and probably pain too for the patient. Now with modern technology, there's all kinds of different custom abutments that can offset poor angulation placement, but you want to avoid that, and you want to know I placed a really perfect spot on implant, but it's really tricky to get the right angles. Placing it and the motion that you're doing with your arm is very different than when you're doing restorative work on teeth. Otherwise, you're not using your wrist, you're using like a stiff arm, which is so different. And positioning of standing around a patient while you're also trying to reflect a flap with part of your hand and your assistant's reflecting the other part of the flap. There's a lot in the mouth. The implant motor still needs to be spraying a lot of liquid. I think it's saline. That way it doesn't overheat the bone and also impede the healing process. So you can't see very well when it's spraying water everywhere and you're reaching around this weird angle. So not only do you want the placement to be really good for restorative purposes, but also if your placement is too far off, you can again cause damage to the bone that you need. You could perforate out the buccal, or you could damage a nerve, whether that's irreversible permanent damage or just minor damage, whatever. But either way, the angulation is very, very important, and the angulation is very hard to do, honestly. But that was something I was so happy to encounter and to talk through with the instructors and also see maybe my partner struggled with it on the first one. So I learned from her, and then I did a really good job on my first one. And then the second one was on a different area of the mouth, and then I struggled with angulation for that one. So it's always kind of different to learn step by step by step. So that was Thursday. And then Friday, they call it Full Arch Friday. So they don't expect you to leave and start doing full arch 6 implants, upper lower arch, the Monday you get back. But they kind of want to like shock your system and just throw you into a very advanced case, obviously with our instructor supervision still, so that when we go back and we're doing a single implant, it seems very straightforward. So that's the point of Full Arch Friday. So same thing, you're paired up with a new instructor, and this is an all-day case. And pretty much the goal was to gradually work us up to feeling comfortable doing full arches as we go through our implant journey. You split up placing the implants with your partners. This is where my experience was very different than most of the other classmates because our case was immediate. So this patient had most of his teeth still, very, very, very dense bone, was very difficult to anesthetize because of his medical history. And that made it a very complicated case. And then we also were thinking about placing implants, and there were also areas of infection. So was it the best immediate case? Not at all, which meant that we both placed less implants than maybe was planned and expected for our experience, which was fine because I learned a lot throughout that process. And I saw a lot of challenges and complications and things. So I was very grateful for that. But I did see my peers in the class, they went into healed, already grafted, alveoloplasty done, perfect arches, boom, 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 boom place. Amazing. So it was very different than theirs. But I think my experience was probably more useful because I'm learning from a lot of challenging complications. But did I walk away placing as many implants that day as they did? No. So you have to kind of go into these things very, very open-minded. But it was a wonderful experience nonetheless. And that was the end of Friday and pretty much the end of the course. We had lunch there every day, provided they got catered luncheon for us. We either had to do breakfast on our own. There was like a hotel that they had us stay at if you wanted to, or you could stay on your own. Most people in the course stayed at the hotel, and they had a shuttle that was free that took us over to the course in the morning and drove us home at night, which was great. The area that they had us stay was extremely walkable. There were 30 plus places to eat and a couple shopping things and a couple coffee shops, all walkable right there. And of course, it's very nice weather all year round in Arizona. So you didn't need a rental car or anything. A couple people chose to get rental cars because maybe they were making a vacation before or after out of it, or maybe they decided to stay somewhere else because they wanted to save a little bit of money on the hotel or something like that. But most of us just stayed at the recommended place. And mainly the only thing you had to expense for otherwise was your meals for breakfast and a couple dinners. They had some like snacky things for breakfast at the center, and then they had a lot of snacks for us throughout the day too. You definitely didn't go hungry, but for me, going into long lectures and surgeries, I need like a hearty breakfast, so I ended up paying for breakfast every day. But I mean, not that big of a deal, but something to keep in mind because in other courses I've been to, breakfast is also provided, and I wouldn't consider like a hearty breakfast was provided here, which was, again, no big deal. But the main things you're paying for are all those implant materials at the course, and the fact that the patients are getting no-cost implants, you're kind of funding those surgeries, and you have access to some very, very premium, expensive grafting materials, and the instructors are happy to let you try out different materials. And honestly, probably some things get wasted. A membrane gets dropped, but it's actually $500. You can't use it again. So things like that happen, and that's part of the reason the course needs to be expensive, plus paying for the people that are faculty. You know, they're dentists, their time is valuable, so I'm sure that also is a component. But they're there because they love teaching and they're very passionate about giving back to learners. So this is a very long episode. I didn't think I was like, oh, I don't even have that much to say. Like, it probably will be such a short episode. But as I started talking, I just kept talking. I guess that's why I'm a podcaster, huh? But I hope this was interesting. If anyone has follow-up questions, send me a message on Instagram. I'm happy to answer more specific questions. Obviously, check out Implant Pathway. That's literally, you could just Google it. That's also the name for their Instagram and everything. Let them know I sent you if you end up going to the course. Again, I do highly, highly recommend it. I think medical complexity, deep understanding of treatment planning and thought process behind dental implant surgeries was excellent at this program. It's just not volume based, which is fine to me, because I would rather understand what I'm doing than just like a robot or like an arcade person just slamming implants into bone. Like that does not make a good surgeon. So I was happy with things, and I was pleasantly surprised, as I said, with the experience with extractions, grafting, suturing was something additional beyond placing implants that I didn't know that we would for sure be doing in this course. And I gained a lot from that too, that you can be doing separately from billing out and doing implants. You can also bill out and do grafting, and you can be better at extractions to make patients' healing easier and to also speed things up for yourself. That way you have less chair time doing them. So many benefits of this course. It was amazing. I'm very, very grateful to have gone, and I look forward to seeing where my implant journey kind of takes me as time goes.